Every night at exactly 2:53 a.m., my husband stood beside my bed in the dark, and for months I believed he was watching me sleep. Until the night I realized he was listening for someone who was never supposed to come back. My name is Lillian May Carter. I am 90 years old as I speak these words, and I am sitting alone in a small apartment in Memphis, Tennessee, with my hands folded in my lap and my memories heavier than my bones. I have lived long enough to know that time does not erase the past. It only teaches you how to live with it. People look at me now and see a quiet old woman. They see wrinkles, slow steps, and soft hands that shake when I lift a cup of tea. What they do not see is the woman I used to be, the woman who spent years sleeping with one eye open, listening to the sound of breathing in the dark, wondering if morning would come. I have told this story only to God and to myself for most of my life. Not because I wanted to protect anyone, but because some truths are so heavy that you fear they will crush whoever hears them. But now, at my age, silence no longer serves me. And if my story can help even one person listen to their instincts before it is too late, then it deserves to be told. I was born and raised in Memphis in the late 1932s. Back when the river decided who you were and how hard you worked, decided whether you survived. I grew up learning that a woman kept her mouth shut, her house clean, and her fears to herself. You did not ask questions. You endured. That was how we were raised. When I married my husband, Harold Carter, I believed endurance was the same thing as strength. I believed a quiet marriage was a safe marriage. I believed that as long as there was no shouting, no bruises, no broken bones, then everything was fine. I was wrong. For the first few years, nothing seemed unusual. We lived a modest life, paid our bills, went to church on Sundays, nodded politely at neighbors. On the outside, we looked like every other couple on our street. But inside that house, something was slowly shifting. Something I could not name at the time. The nights were the worst. It started with a feeling, the kind you cannot explain to anyone without sounding foolish. That sense that you are not alone, even when the room is silent. That pressure on your chest, like the air itself is holding its breath. Then came the sound of footsteps on the floorboards. Then the presence. Always at 2:53 a.m. Always beside my bed. Always silent. I did not scream. I did not confront him. I told myself stories to survive. I told myself he was sleepwalking. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself that a good wife does not accuse her husband of something she cannot prove. But the truth does not disappear just because you refuse to look at it. And what I would eventually discover did not just change my marriage. It changed the way I understood fear, love, and the cost of keeping secrets. Before I tell you what happened next, let me say this clearly. If something inside you is whispering that something is wrong, listen. Because I didn't. And the price of that silence followed me for the rest of my life. I married Harold Carter in the spring of 1954, when I was barely 20 years old and thought love was something that arrived after the wedding, not before it. Back then in Memphis, no one asked a young woman what she felt. They asked who her family was, whether she could cook, and if she knew how to keep a house quiet. Harold worked at a freight warehouse near the river, loading and unloading cargo that came in by rail and barge. It was hard work, the kind that bent a man's shoulders forward and taught him how to stay silent. He came home every evening with dust on his boots and sweat on his collar, nodded at me, washed his hands, and sat down to eat. He never complained, and he never explained his day. That was just how he was. We lived in a narrow shotgun house not far from the Mississippi, with thin walls and floors that creaked with every step. I kept the place clean. I cooked what I could afford. I learned to stretch meals, to mend clothes, to make a home feel warm even when money was tight. Harold paid the bills on time and never drank more than a beer or two on Sundays. By every standard people cared about, he was a good husband. Affection was never part of our marriage, but I did not think that made us unusual. My mother had warned me not to expect tenderness from a man. Men showed love by working, by providing, by staying. That was what I believed for a long time. We had 2 children, both born at home with the help of a midwife who lived 3 streets over. I devoted myself to them completely. Harold held the babies once, maybe twice, and then returned to his routines. He was not cruel to the children. He was simply distant, as if there was a wall inside him that no one could cross. During the day, life moved in steady patterns. Mornings were for laundry and breakfast. Afternoons were for cleaning and listening to the radio while the children napped. Evenings were quiet. Harold ate, read the paper, and went to bed early. There were no arguments, no slammed doors, no raised voices. Silence filled the spaces where other couples might have had conversations. Looking back now, I realize how easy it is to confuse peace with safety. Nothing felt wrong enough to leave. Nothing felt broken enough to fix. Friends at church spoke of far worse marriages. Some came in with bruises hidden under sleeves. Some cried in bathrooms. I told myself I was lucky. I told myself that unease was a small price to pay for stability. But there were moments, small ones, that stayed with me even then. Harold flinched when someone knocked unexpectedly. He locked doors twice. He kept important papers hidden where even I could not find them. When I asked simple questions about money or work, he changed the subject or went quiet. At night, he fell asleep quickly, as if exhaustion were his only refuge. I often lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing, wondering what he dreamed about. He never spoke in his sleep. He never reached for me. He slept like a man who was running from something even in rest. I did not understand then that a life built on silence eventually demands payment. And when it comes due, it does not ask whether you are ready. By the time the nights began to change, by the time 2:53 became a fixed point in my life, I had already learned to ignore my own discomfort. That habit would nearly cost me everything. The first night it happened, I did not understand what I was seeing. I woke up suddenly, the way you do when your body senses danger before your mind catches up. The room was dark and quiet, the kind of silence that feels too heavy to be natural. For a moment, I thought I had dreamed myself awake. Then I felt it. The presence. Someone standing too close. I opened my eyes slowly and saw Harold's shape beside the bed. He was fully upright, barefoot on the cold floor, his shoulders stiff, his arms hanging at his sides. He did not move. He did not speak. He simply stood there, close enough that I could feel the heat from his body. My heart began to pound so loudly I was certain he would hear it. I wanted to call his name, to ask what he was doing, but fear pinned the words inside my chest. I told myself not to move. Not yet. The darkness made it hard to see his face, but I could tell he was not looking at my eyes. His gaze was fixed somewhere past me, like he was staring through my body instead of at it. That frightened me more than anything else. After what felt like a long time, though it may have only been a minute or two, he turned and walked back to his side of the bed. The mattress dipped as he lay down. Within moments, his breathing settled into the steady rhythm of sleep. I did not sleep again that night. By morning, I had convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe he had gotten up to use the bathroom. Maybe he had been disoriented. Maybe I had dreamed it. I did not mention it when I made breakfast. Harold drank his coffee, folded his newspaper, and left for work without a word. The second night, it happened again. This time, when I woke up, I glanced at the clock on the dresser. The red numbers glowed in the dark. 2:53 a.m. The same time as the night before, though I could not remember how I knew that, the certainty settled into me like a weight. Harold was already standing there. He stayed longer the second night, long enough for my fear to shift into something colder and sharper, long enough for questions to form that I did not want to ask. When he finally returned to bed, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, counting my breaths, waiting for the sun. On the third night, I tested myself. I stayed awake as long as I could, pretending to sleep only when my eyes burned with exhaustion. When I woke, there he was again. 2:53, exact. By the end of the first week, the pattern was undeniable. Every night, without fail, he rose from the bed, walked to my side, and stood there in silence. He never touched me. He never whispered. He never made a sound beyond the soft creak of the floorboards beneath his feet. During the day, he acted exactly the same as always. When I asked if he had trouble sleeping, he looked at me as if I had spoken a foreign language. He said he slept fine. He said I worried too much. I began to doubt myself. I told myself stress could cause hallucinations. I told myself a tired mind could invent routines. But fear does not grow out of nothing. It grows because something is feeding it. As the nights passed, I noticed other things. The way he seemed more alert after standing there. The way his eyes followed the windows instead of me when we talked. The way he checked the front door lock before bed, then checked it again. 2:53 stopped being a time on the clock. It became a warning. And I did not yet understand what it was warning me about. But deep down, I knew one thing. Whatever Harold was doing in the dark had nothing to do with sleep. And it was only a matter of time before that truth came looking for me. By the third month, my body began to give up before my mind did. Sleep became something I feared instead of needed. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound the house made, counting the minutes until the clock crept closer to 2:53. When I did drift off, it was shallow and broken, filled with dreams where I was running through dark hallways that never ended. I stopped eating without realizing it. Food lost its taste. My dresses began to hang loose around my shoulders. My hands shook when I poured coffee. The woman in the mirror looked sharp and hollow, like someone already halfway gone. Harold noticed nothing. Or, if he did, he said nothing. He left for work the same time every morning. He came home, ate in silence, and went to bed early. At night, the pattern continued. The floorboards creaked. His presence loomed beside me. And then he returned to bed, as calm as ever. The children began to change too. My youngest started waking up crying from nightmares she could not explain. She refused to sleep with the lights off and clung to me whenever Harold entered the room. My older child grew quieter, watching everything, asking questions I avoided answering. Children sense danger long before they can name it. One morning, as I stepped onto the front porch, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Mud. Dark, damp footprints just outside the door. It had not rained in days. I stared at them for a long time, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Harold was already gone for work. The children were still asleep. I wiped the prints away with a wet rag, my hands trembling. That night, I asked him casually if he had gone outside during the night. He looked at me for a moment too long before answering. No. Why would I do that? His voice was calm. His eyes were not. The next morning, the footprints were there again. Always near the door. Always gone by the time anyone else could see them. I began checking the windows before bed, making sure they were locked. I moved quietly through the house at night, afraid to make noise, afraid to be noticed. My mind raced with explanations I did not want to believe. Was someone else coming to the house? Was Harold meeting someone in the night? Or worse, was someone watching us from the dark? The thought that chilled me the most was the simplest one. What if Harold was not standing beside my bed because of me at all? What if he was waiting? I started hiding small things, just to test reality. I placed a chair against the front door. In the morning, it had been moved back into place. I tucked the house key into a drawer. By evening, it was back on the hook. Each discovery tightened the knot in my chest. I prayed constantly, not for answers, but for endurance. I prayed for morning. I prayed for my children's safety. I prayed for the courage to face whatever was happening, even though I had no idea what that might be. By then, fear had become my constant companion. It followed me through the day and sat at the edge of the bed at night, waiting with me for 2:53. I considered leaving. I imagined packing a bag and taking the children to my sister's house across town. But leaving without understanding felt dangerous. What if I was wrong? What if I was tearing my family apart over something I could not prove? And yet, staying felt worse. The house no longer felt like a shelter. It felt like a place where something unfinished was slowly closing in on us. And with every passing night, I became more certain of one thing. Whatever was happening was getting closer. And when it finally arrived, it would not announce itself. By the time summer settled heavy over Memphis, my fear had taken on a shape. If I could name it, I thought, I could control it. I became convinced that Harold meant to kill me. It sounds dramatic to say it out loud, but that was the only explanation my exhausted mind could hold on to. Men had done worse for less. I had read the stories in the paper. Quiet husbands who snapped. Wives found dead in their beds. Neighbors saying they never saw it coming. At night, I lay rigid, every muscle tight, listening for any change in his breathing. I imagined his hands around my throat, a pillow pressed over my face. I imagined the children waking up alone in the morning, calling for me, finding me cold and still. The thought hollowed me out. I started preparing in small, secret ways. I hid a kitchen knife under the mattress. I moved my purse closer to the door. I memorized the sound of every step in the house so I would know if something changed. I slept in my clothes more than once, just in case I had to run. And yet, he never touched me. Night after night, he rose at 2:53, stood beside me, and did nothing. No violence, no words, no threat I could point to and say, this is it. Just the waiting. That was what confused me most. If he wanted me dead, why hesitate? Why stand there like a statue, breathing quietly, as if he were listening instead of watching? Why return to bed and sleep peacefully afterward? The fear began to twist into something worse. Doubt. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind, if exhaustion had turned my thoughts into something dangerous. I looked at my children and felt ashamed. What if I was inventing a monster where there was none? What if I ran and destroyed their family for no reason? One night, I decided to test him. I stayed awake deliberately, forcing my eyes open long past midnight. I sat in the dark, counting seconds, waiting for the moment he always rose. When the clock ticked past 2:53, nothing happened. Harold did not move. He slept soundly beside me, his back turned, his breathing slow and even. I lay there shaking, my certainty unraveling. Had I imagined the whole thing? Had my fear created a pattern that did not exist? The next night, I tried again. I stayed awake, nothing. But on the third night, when exhaustion finally pulled me under, I woke to the familiar weight in the room. He was there again. 2:53. That was when the realization hit me, sharp and terrifying. He knew. Somehow, he knew when I was awake. He waited until I slept to get up. The thought sent a cold wave through me. It meant intention. It meant awareness. It meant whatever he was doing, he did not want me to see it fully awake. From that moment on, every movement he made during the day felt rehearsed. Every word felt measured. I watched him closely, looking for cracks, for anger, for guilt. But he remained the same quiet man I had married, polite, distant, unremarkable. The fear of murder still lived in my chest, but it no longer explained everything. Something else was happening, something more complicated and far more dangerous. And I was running out of time to understand it. Because whatever Harold was waiting for at 2:53 was not going to wait forever. And when it finally arrived, I had a feeling it would not be aimed at just one of us. By then, fear had taught me discipline. I knew I could not simply stay awake. He sensed it. Whether by the rhythm of my breathing or the tension in my body, Harold knew the difference between rest and pretending. So if I was going to learn the truth, I had to disappear completely. I had to sleep the way people do when they have no worries at all. I chose a Monday night. Ordinary nights are easier to hide inside. I went to bed early, earlier than usual, complaining of a headache. I drank no coffee that day. I ate little. I let exhaustion settle into my bones until it felt natural. When Harold turned off the light and rolled away from me, I waited. I waited until my body gave in and sleep took me somewhere shallow and quiet. When I woke, it was dark. The house felt heavier than usual, like the air had thickened. I did not open my eyes. I did not move my hands. I slowed my breathing deliberately, counting each rise and fall of my chest, making it deep and steady. I listened. The clock ticked softly on the dresser. Somewhere outside, a train horn sounded along the river. I did not dare look at the time, but I knew. I always knew. The mattress shifted. Harold sat up slowly, careful not to wake me. I felt the weight leave the bed as he stood. His footsteps were quiet, practiced, as he crossed the room. The floorboard near my side creaked once, softly. He stopped beside me. I kept my breathing even. I let my jaw relax. I imagined myself sinking through the mattress, far away from my own body. I told myself that if I moved, even a little, everything would end. Time stretched. Then something changed. Instead of standing, he lowered himself. I heard fabric brush against wood, a soft thump. He had knelt beside the bed. My heart slammed so hard I thought it might give me away. He leaned closer. I felt his presence near my face, closer than he had ever been before. His breath touched my cheek. I did not flinch. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then he spoke. Not to me. His voice was barely a whisper, thin and trembling, like it had been worn down by years of use. I am still waiting, he said. I have not forgotten. The words sent a jolt through me. Waiting for who? He swallowed hard. I could hear it. His breathing grew uneven. I did what you asked, he whispered. I kept quiet. I stayed. I did not tell her. My chest tightened. Her. Not me. There was a pause, and then a sound I had never heard from Harold before. A quiet sob, quickly smothered. I cannot sleep, he said. If I sleep, I will miss it. If I miss it, it will happen again. Again. My fingers curled into the sheet, but I forced them still. He shifted his weight, pressing his forehead briefly against the side of the bed, like a man praying without knowing how. His voice broke when he spoke again. Please, he whispered, just let it end. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him and demand answers. But I stayed silent. I stayed invisible. After a while, he stood. His knees creaked as he rose. He lingered a moment longer, as if listening for something I could not hear. Then he returned to bed. Within minutes, his breathing evened out. He slept. I did not. I lay there until morning, my mind racing through every word he had spoken, every implication. He was not watching me. He was waiting. He was listening. And whatever he feared was tied to something buried deep in our past. Something he believed could still come back. Something he had never told me. Not even once. By morning, I understood something I had been too afraid to admit before. Harold was not dangerous because he wanted to hurt me. He was dangerous because he was terrified. I watched him closely that day, more closely than I ever had. His hands shook when he poured his coffee. He flinched at sudden sounds. When a truck backfired down the street, he froze, his eyes darting toward the front door, as if he expected someone to be standing there. That afternoon, while the children were at school, I went searching. Not through drawers or closets, but through memory. I thought back to the early years of our marriage, to the things I had dismissed as unimportant. The nights he came home late with no explanation. The scar on his forearm he claimed came from work. The way he avoided certain streets near the river. The way he refused to talk about one particular year, no matter how gently I asked. That year was 1949. Before our marriage. I remembered a story from the neighborhood, one I had not thought about in years. A boy who drowned near the river after dark. The police ruled it an accident. No one was ever blamed. The family moved away. The town forgot. But Harold never went near that stretch of water. That night, I followed him. When 2:53 came, he rose as always. This time, instead of stopping beside the bed, he walked past me and toward the back of the house. I waited until the door clicked softly shut before I moved. Barefoot, heart racing, I crept after him. He stood near the back window, staring out into the yard, his face pale in the moonlight. He whispered again, but this time I could hear the name. Eli. The sound of it hit me like a blow. Eli was the boy from the river, the one everyone said slipped on wet stones and never came back up. I stepped forward before fear could stop me. "Harold," I said. He turned slowly. When he saw me, truly saw me, something in him broke. He collapsed into the chair by the window, his shoulders shaking. I did not wait for permission. He told me everything. That summer, long before we met, he and 2 other boys had been drinking by the river. They dared each other to climb down onto the rocks. Eli slipped. He cried for help. Harold reached for him but pulled back when someone shouted that they would all go to prison. They ran. They told themselves the river would take the blame. But Harold never escaped it. Every year, around the same date, he began to hear things. Footsteps, water dripping, a knock that never quite arrived. He convinced himself that if he stayed awake, if he listened hard enough, he could stop it from happening again. 2:53 was the time Eli went under. The time the river swallowed his voice. Harold believed that if he slept through it, the past would return in a way he could not control. He was not watching me. He was guarding the present from a memory that refused to stay buried. The silence in our house was not peace. It was guilt. And now that I knew, I understood something even more frightening. Guilt does not fade with time. It waits. And if you build your life on it, it will eventually demand to be seen, whether you are ready or not. After that night, nothing could return to the way it had been. Knowing the truth did not bring peace. It brought clarity. And clarity, I learned, can be heavier than fear. Harold did not beg me to stay. He did not ask for forgiveness. He simply sat there, hollowed out by years of waiting, and said he was tired of listening, tired of standing in the dark, tired of being afraid that sleep would invite the past back into our home. The next morning, I packed a bag for myself and the children. I did not shout. I did not accuse. I told him we were leaving for a while. I told him the house needed air, and so did we. He nodded like a man who had expected this answer for a long time. We went to my sister's place on the other side of Memphis. Weeks turned into months. Harold never came to get us. He wrote once. The letter was short. He said he was seeking help. He said he finally slept through the night. I never returned to that house. Years later, I heard he sold it and moved closer to the river. Some wounds pull people back to where they began. I chose a different ending. I raised my children in a home where silence was not a warning and sleep was not a battle. Now, sitting here at 90 years old, I understand something I could not see back then. The most dangerous things in life are not always violent. Sometimes they are quiet. Sometimes they stand beside you every night and never say a word. Harold did not hurt me with his hands. He hurt us with his secrets. And I learned that love without truth slowly poisons everything it touches. Before I end this story, I want to leave you with 5 lessons this life taught me the hard way. First, silence can be more dangerous than anger. Second, fear is not always weakness. Sometimes it is a warning. Third, the past does not stay buried just because you refuse to speak its name. Fourth, love without honesty becomes a prison for everyone involved. Fifth, listening to your instincts can save your life and the lives of those you love. If this story made you feel something, I hope you sit with it for a moment. Ask yourself what quiet things you have been ignoring. And if you feel comfortable, tell me in the comments what lesson you took from this story and what city you are watching from. I read every word, and so do others who may need to know they are not alone. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, please like, share, and comment. You never know who might be listening in the dark, waiting for someone else to speak first.